So I just mentioned George Kennan's piece, The Sources of Soviet Conduct, where Kennan does an excellent job giving us insight into why the Soviet Union has the mentality that it does. One of the things that Kennan tells us is really essential here is that the Soviets are moved by an ideology. Their ideology drives them to do certain things, will drive them to have certain ambitions. Kennan's view of the Soviet Union, thus, is very, very valuable for American foreign policymakers because it alerts them to the reality that there's an enemy who wants something different than what we want. But it's not until we get to the fifth piece that I've assigned for you for this section, Whittaker Chambers' witness, that we really get a clear sense as to what drives the Soviet Union. Why is Chambers' witness so powerful? Hopefully you found it powerful when you were reading through it. I think it's powerful because Chambers comes at the issue of communism from the perspective of being a communist. He explains what drives communism as an idea. Why does it have all of these adherents? He tells us, and I'm going to reference here page 1231 at the beginning of the essay, that more than myself was on trial in the trials of Alger Hiss. Hiss had been a Soviet spy working at the high levels of American government. He says two faiths were on trial. Human societies, like human beings, work on the basis of faith, the basis of why we believe what we believe. Now, what Chambers tells us in telling and suggesting to us that the story of the Soviet Union is really a story of faith is he opens us up to the grander purpose behind the Soviet Union. If you turn on the next page in the text where he talks about the faith, what is the Soviet faith? It says, in fact, it's not new. The Soviet Union's faith in communism was man's second oldest faith. Its promise was whispered in the first days of the creation under the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Ye shall be as gods. It's the great alternative faith of mankind. Well, think of what Whittaker Chambers has done just then. He's placed everything that's taking place around the world in the 1940s and the 1950s from the grandest perspective. That perspective is, who rules the world? Who's the creative intelligence of the world? Is God the creative intelligence of the world? Or should mankind take up that creative intelligence of the world? Displace God? What he's saying to us here is what communists believed is that human beings could create a better world for humanity than the world that God had created. Why? Well, the problem for the Soviets and the problem for communists in general, right? The great suffering that exists in the world is suffering that exists based upon human inequality. You see, what Whittaker Chambers is telling us is that the Soviets really witnessed for what they believed in because they believed in that we were doing something incredibly just. This great story of an author, Dostoevsky, a Russian author, who was also, like Whittaker Chambers, a former communist. And he says the following in the middle of his great book, The Grand Inquisitor, the chapter of The Grand Inquisitor in his middle of his great book, The Brothers Karamazov. It's not that I don't believe in God, but I wanted to give God his ticket back. I wanted to give God his ticket back because God had allowed human beings to do terrible things to one another. Not just simply combatants in war who do terrible things to one another, not simply individuals in different classes who do terrible things to one another, but human beings over and over and over again have shown themselves willing to do great harm to another, great evil to another. Look at all the suffering that's in the world. Well, the Soviet mindset says, if we act as rational human beings and we eradicate inequality and we don't allow individuals to do terrible things to one another, then we will create a heaven in this world. It'll be a secular heaven. It'll be a world in which all are equal. And Chambers says, I decided to become an ex-communist because I thought that belief and presence of the soul and freedom were more important than working on what I had previously thought was the most just mission, which was to eradicate inequality. What Chambers has done for us here then is he suggested The battle between the Soviet Union and the United States is not simply the battle between two particular regimes in the middle of a century. It's a battle that's been taking place over centuries. Ever since there have been human beings, there's been a battle that takes place between human beings thinking it's best for them to have power and relying upon God for everything.